Alright you guys, welcome back to part 3 of the 1,000-gallon paludarium build. As you can see, we've got all of our mortar and concrete is dry. We're just about to put up a frame so we can do all the detail work on the side right here, and then we're going to get to carving, you guys. So let's do this, I'm excited.
Alright you guys, there is a lot to cover in this video. Now, this day I spent about 10 hours working on this. So to condense that all into a 10-minute video, there's a lot of this just is sped up, there's a lot of detail that's missed, but I'm going to try to show you how to do this as best as I can. Now, the first part of the video is we're just going to mix up some concrete, so let's get to that. Now this first batch of concrete that I made was a little bit rough. I shouldn't have added as much sand as I did, so it didn't want to stick together as much as I had hoped it was, but that's why I started on this rock, because it doesn't matter if the concrete falls off the rock because the rock's on the ground. Now as we go about this, then I tried a couple of different application methods. Mostly I would use this paint scooper to just throw the concrete onto the wall. Sometimes I'd use my hands. I should have worn gloves on both hands. I ended up actually giving myself some lime burn on both my hands. Most of that was from the first day though, but let me tell you, you do not want to do this without gloves because your hands will peel like crazy. Now it did take probably 3 batches of concrete before I really started to understand the ratio of mortar to sand to concrete mix, along with the water ratio, to get the color right as well. The very first batch I mixed up, I actually didn't put in the right amount of black, and so it ended up drying really lightly colored. As you can see here, it's totally differently colored than the rest of the mortar that puts on the wall. Now, I luckily did manage to find the ratio as we moved higher up on the build to make sure that the concrete stopped falling down as much, but it was very much a trial by fire method. Now, unfortunately for you guys, I actually got a call from my best friend who's on deployment in the Middle East right now, and so I was on the phone rather than recording because that's much more important. But moving on, as you can see here, I was forming a couple of different cracks along this edge, and I was trying to maintain the shapes of the rocks that I'd previously sculpted. As we go through, then I start using concrete stamps that I actually made. I will post a video about that next week. But the important part was getting the texture and trying to figure out how exactly I wanted this rock to look. Now, it's difficult to see the amount of texture from this distance, which I hadn't realized till I stopped recording, but you can tell that there is texture being put on. Now, this is so much easier than carving everything, you guys. I cannot stress how difficult this would be if I had not made these concrete stamps. It would have taken so much more time than I have, and it would not have looked nearly as good as this final project ended up turning out. I want to apologize for the shakiness of the camera. I had the tripod up on the platform with me and I didn't realize how much it was moving around when I was pounding the stamp in. As you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm using a crack stamp to create this little texture pattern that goes along. Now, often what I would do is I would use the same stamp in different locations just to change the pattern a little bit. Now, I did run into a problem here because I was pounding so much, I actually dislodged the mortar on the top left-hand corner. And because it was drying already, then it didn't want to stick back to the wall, so what I did was I just put a screw straight through there, and that solved the problem I was dealing with. While the stamps are great for texturing, they can't do everything, so it's important to go back over with a trowel to create texture in the cracks and to just give extra depth to certain areas of the mortar. Now, you have to let this dry for about an hour before you can go back and pick it out. Otherwise, it destroys the surrounding concrete. It's also very important to have a masonry brush to go through and to help clean everything up, but also it helps add a little bit of texture as this stuff is drying. There's a couple of areas where I exclusively use the masonry brush to just poke little micro holes in everything, and ended up turning more of a granite slate look. I know those are totally different, but it's hard to explain how well it ended up looking. I will have further videos in the future that show how detailed this ends up looking, but this is what we got for right now. Now, the concrete texture for this was particularly difficult because I needed to create the perfect mixture that would stay really strong over time and not crack, but also have the least amount of rocks in there. So I actually mixed in extra fibers into this section. And the reason for this is because we're going to be putting on a Mayan calendar stamp in this area. Now, if I had bought this calendar, it would have actually cost me over $350 just for the stamp. Luckily, I had a landscaping client last year that gave me one of these hanging Mayan calendars, and I used silicone to then create a mold out of this. Now, I went a little overboard here with the pounding. I should have just left it as it was after the first couple of times, but I was trying to get the most detail, but I ended up actually pushing it down too far and smashing some of the details. So it just goes to show, if you're trying to be a perfectionist, just don't sometimes. It ended up turning out really good after I painted it, which will be in the next video, but I'm very happy with how this ended up turning out. From this point onward, I'm not going to do anything that I haven't already talked about, so enjoy the music, you guys. Please like and subscribe for more.